Imagine getting a full do-over on life. Every memory, every regret, every cringe-worthy failure packed into your reincarnated toddler brain. That's the wild premise of Mushoku Tensei, Jobless Reincarnation, one of the most beloved isekai series of the modern era. Season 1 is a sprawling, emotionally rich 23-episode journey, plus one OVA, that takes our protagonist Rudeus Greyrat from a baby magician in a cozy village all the way to a broken young man standing alone at the edge of the world. Whether you want to relive the season or are here to see what all the fuss is about, this is your ultimate episode-by-episode breakdown. The series opens with the pathetic and genuinely tragic death of a nameless, homeless Japanese man who, after being hit by a truck while trying to save some teenagers, wakes up reincarnated as a baby named Rudeus Greyrat in a lush fantasy world. Born to the swordsman Paul Greyrat and his healer wife Zenith, Rudeus retains every memory of his past life and immediately starts applying his adult intellect to his new circumstances, learning to read and secretly practicing magic almost from infancy. His extraordinary talent catches his parents' attention, and they hire the Magurdia demon adventurer Roxy Magurdia as his private magic tutor. Roxy initially has serious reservations about teaching someone so young, but the moment Rudeus casually demonstrates his ability to cast spells without incantations, a rare and advanced skill, she realizes she's dealing with no ordinary child. The episode ends on a quietly stirring note. At Roxy's welcome party, Rudeus silently vows to make the absolute most of this second chance at life, a life of genuine purpose, connection, and happiness. This episode fleshes out the emotional architecture of Rudeus's past life through a series of haunting flashbacks, chief among them the severe bullying he endured in school that turned him into a shut-in, and the moment he was dragged out of his room and thrown out by his family. Back in the present, months of rigorous magic training with Roxy fly by until, on the eve of Rudeus's 5th birthday, Roxy announces she has nothing left to teach him and sets his graduation exam for the following day. For the first time, Rudeus leaves his home and accompanies Roxy into the outside world. He struggles with the overwhelming flood of fear and shame that comes with stepping outside, but watching Roxy navigate prejudice and social awkwardness with warmth and grace helps him push through. The graduation exam is spectacular. Rudeus summons an enormous thunderstorm, leaving Roxy no choice but to declare him passed. With their teacher-student relationship officially concluded, Roxy departs to continue her journey, and Rudeus tearfully thanks her, the woman who, without knowing it, gave him back his courage. Emboldened by Roxy's influence and his first successful outing, Rudeus begins venturing outside on his own. One day, he stumbles upon a half-elf child being tormented by a group of bullies and steps in to help, assuming the child is a boy and nicknaming them Sylph. The two bond quickly, with Rudeus taking Sylph on as a magic student, and it becomes apparent that Sylph shares Rudeus's rare ability to cast spells without incantations. Their friendship blossoms over the following months, until an awkward and deeply ill-judged incident where Rudeus forcibly removes Sylph's clothes during a rainstorm to share a bath, only to discover that Sylph is, in fact, a girl named Sylphiette. Rudeus is mortified and apologizes sincerely, but Sylphiette understandably starts avoiding him. The episode ends on a warm note, though. Sylphiette eventually approaches him again, they reconcile, and Rudeus privately commits himself to genuinely cherishing this friendship, the first real one he's ever had in any life. Life at the Greyrat household gets complicated fast. First, the good news. Zenith is pregnant again and the whole family is thrilled. Then the bombshell. The family maid, Lilia, confesses she is also pregnant, the result of an affair with Paul. The tension is volcanic. Rudeus, drawing on his adult emotional intelligence, quietly pieces together that Lilia was the one who initiated the affair, but he wisely places all the blame on Paul to protect Lilia from Zenith's justifiable fury. His intervention earns him Lilia's fierce, lifelong loyalty. In due course, Zenith gives birth to Norn, and Lilia gives birth to Aisha, and the family settles back into a fragile equilibrium. Around this time, Rudeus receives an encouraging letter from Roxy suggesting he consider studying at the Renoa University of Magic, a tantalizing prospect, though Sylphiette's reluctance to have him leave gives him pause. Rudeus resolves to find a way to fund her tuition too, but the decision is taken out of his hands when his parents arrange for the beast warrior Ghislaine de Doldia to escort him to a tutoring position out of the village. On the road with Ghislaine, Rudeus reads Paul's letter detailing the job he has arranged, tutoring the daughter of a nobleman in the city of Roa, along with the sobering caveat that Rudeus is forbidden from returning home or seeing Sylphiette for 5 years. Arriving in Roa, Rudeus meets his employer, Philip Boreas Greyra, the city's mayor and a cousin of Paul's, and discovers his new student is Philip's volatile, hot-headed daughter, Eris. Eris is immediately hostile, making it crystal clear she has zero interest in being tutored. Thinking laterally, Rudeus hatches a plan to win her trust. With Philip's secret blessing, he stages a fake kidnapping designed to let him rescue her and earn her respect. The plan goes horribly sideways, however, when a real spy in Philip's household tips off actual criminals who hijack the fake kidnapping and turn it into a genuine one. Rudeus fights ferociously to protect Eris until Ghislaine arrives and cleans house, killing the criminals and arresting the traitor. Shaken but impressed, Eris agrees to accept Rudeus as her tutor, and a begrudging but significant partnership begins. Philip quietly warns Rudeus not to advertise his Greyrot family connections, since it paints a target on his back. Life settles into a routine. Ghislaine teaches both Eris and Rudeus swordsmanship, while Rudeus teaches Eris and Ghislaine magic, basic literacy, and math. But Eris is, frankly, a terrible student. Restless and easily bored, she skips class constantly. Rudeus, showing genuine pedagogical creativity, introduces a weekly day off to reward her attendance and keep her motivated. On one of these outings, Eris tries to buy Rudeus an expensive book out of affection, but Rudeus gently refuses, using the moment as a teaching opportunity about financial independence. He suggests she ask her father for an allowance, which Eris does, and she uses it to buy Rudeus a small vial she'd seen him eyeing. This leads to a hilariously awkward situation. The vial is actually an aphrodisiac, and Rudeus must now scramble to keep that particular secret from both Eris and Ghislaine. Eris's 10th birthday is on the horizon, and with it comes the social obligation of a formal party where she'll be expected to dance with other nobles. Her dance teacher gets folded into Rudeus's tutoring schedule, freeing up time for Rudeus to pursue foreign language studies, aided by both Ghislaine and, through correspondence, Roxy. The problem is that Eris shows virtually no improvement in dancing whatsoever, despite her effort. Rudeus refuses to let her give up and starts personally helping with her dance lessons, coaxing incremental progress. On the night of the party, it all comes to a head when Eris freezes up and fails to dance with a young noble. Rudeus steps in and, thinking on his feet, whispers an inspired suggestion: translate her combat instincts and footwork into dance movement. It clicks. The two share an unexpectedly graceful dance that earns the admiration of the room. After the party, Eris's powerful grandfather Sarah spots an unusual ball of light in the sky and, with a grim expression, murmurs that it could be a very bad omen indeed. 2 years pass. Rudeus's birthday arrives, and though his own family cannot attend due to a surge in monster activity across the country, Philip and Eris mark the occasion generously, presenting Rudeus with a high-quality magic staff. In a surprising move, Philip goes a step further and proposes that Rudeus marry Eris and become his heir, an offer Rudeus politely declines. That night, Eris turns up uninvited in Rudeus' room, and in a moment of recklessness, Rudeus attempts to initiate something physical, only to be firmly and physically rejected. He immediately recognizes his mistake and apologizes. Eris forgives him, though the awkwardness lingers. Then the real bombshell drops. A massive cloud of mana materializes in the sky over the region, drawing the attention of the legendary hero Perugius Dola, who dispatches his aide Aramanfi to investigate. Aramanfi sets his sights on Rudeus as a potential cause, launching an attack mid-training session, but Ghislaine defends him and asserts his innocence, right before a catastrophic burst of light consumes them all. Rudeus awakens inside a dreamlike space, looking like his old Japanese self, where he has a brief and cryptic encounter with a mysterious entity called the Human God, who instructs him to trust and assist the man who saved him. Coming back to his senses, Rudeus finds himself stranded in the middle of the demon continent alongside Eris, both of them clearly transported by the mana explosion from Episode 8. Their rescuer is the imposing Ruijerd Superdaya, a member of the widely feared Superd race, who despite his terrifying reputation, agrees to protect them and escort them home. Ruijerd takes the pair to the nearby Magurdia village, Roxy's birthplace, where Rudeus learns the real story behind the Superd's dark reputation. It was the cursed spears gifted by the demon god Laplace that drove his people to murderous madness. Ruijerd himself was only freed from that curse when he killed his own son in a frenzy, a grief he now channels into a singular mission to restore his race's honor. Deeply moved by his determination and dignity, Rudeus resolves to help him, and the trio sets off into the demon continent together. The newly formed trio, Rudeus, Eris, and Ruijerd, arrive at the city of Rikarisu, where their first challenge is getting Ruijerd through the gates. Since the Superd race is universally feared and despised, Rudeus dyes Ruijerd's hair and passes him off as a Magurdia tribesman, and the three register as the adventuring party Dead End. Their novice rank immediately becomes a problem. The pay from low-level quests barely covers their expenses. Acting on the human god's advice, Rudeus takes a quest to find a missing pet, which leads them to a corrupt group of adventurers who've been kidnapping animals to claim the finder's reward. During the confrontation, one of the criminals strikes Rudeus, and Ruijerd executes him on the spot. Demonstrating his growing strategic cunning, Rudeus then leverages the remaining criminals' higher adventuring rank, essentially coercing them into taking on bigger jobs while lending Dead End the reputation boost they desperately need. Back in the larger world, the fallout from the mana surge in Fitoa is becoming clearer and more devastating. Paul's entire family is missing except for Norn, and he is frantically coordinating search parties to find the others. Meanwhile, Dead End undertakes a quest to track down a mysterious monster in a dense forest, only to discover two other adventuring parties in the same area. When one of those parties is ambushed, Rudeus makes the brutal calculation to hold back and observe rather than immediately intervene, a decision that ends with one adventurer's death. The monster then surfaces and kills the other party before Dead End brings it down. Back in Rikarisu, a nosy adventurer figures out Rudeus's rank gaming scheme and tries to blackmail him. Ruijerd's response is immediate and terrifying. He drops his disguise, reveals his identity as a Superd, and promises the man a swift death if he breathes a word. The episode closes with Roxy, still searching for Rudeus, arriving on the demon continent with two of Paul's former companions, just barely missing him. Dead End finally reaches a coastal port city, their gateway off the demon continent, only to hit a financial wall. Ruijerd's passage fee is astronomical because of his race, and they simply can't afford it. The human god appears again in Rudeus's dreams, nudging him toward a specific food stall where he encounters a disheveled, ravenous vagrant. He feeds her, and she repays the kindness by revealing herself as the reincarnated demon emperor Kishirika Kishirisu, a figure of immense mythological weight, who rewards Rudeus with a demon eye that allows him to perceive a few seconds into the future. Rudeus quickly puts this gift to use, preventing a stranger from being seriously injured, which turns out to be a useful investment. When Rudeus's ticket remains an impossibility financially, Rudeus considers selling his beloved magic staff to cover the cost. But Rudeus firmly talks him out of it, pointing out with surprising emotional intelligence that the staff was a gift from Eris, and selling it would wound her feelings. The man Rudeus saved shows up and introduces himself as Gallus Cleaner, apparently eager to return the favor. Roxy, along with her companions Talhand and Elinalise, arrives in the very same coastal city, actively searching for any trace of Rudeus. But because Rudeus has been traveling under an alias, Roxy never connects the dots. She even stumbles across Eris and Rudeus sparring in the street, but panics at the sight of what she assumes are two superds and immediately flees. A full search of the city turns up nothing, and Roxy's party departs for the next town, the two parties never coming face to face. Meanwhile, Gallus makes good on his promise to help. He smuggles Rudeus onto a ship bound for Zant port in exchange for Rudeus liberating some goods upon arrival. In Zant, Rudeus discovers the liberation job involves rescuing beast children held captive by a smuggling ring. Rudeus eliminates the smugglers and gets the children to safety while Rudeus stays behind to free a magical dog, only to be ambushed and captured by two beastmen who were independently trying to rescue the children and mistake Rudeus for one of the smugglers. Rudeus finds himself imprisoned in Doldia village, where he meets a fellow captive, a roguish human named Geese. Things escalate rapidly when the smuggling ring mounts an attack on the village, targeting the beast children, and both Rudeus and Geese break out to help defend it. They help neutralize most of the attackers, but the real shock comes when Gallus Cleaner is unmasked as the head of the entire smuggling operation. Gallus is dangerously powerful and cuts through the defenders easily, killing two men and nearly overwhelming them all, until the sacred beast joins the fray and tips the scales. After a grueling combined effort, Gallus is defeated. Rudeus reunites with Eris and Rudeus. The village apologizes and thanks him, and the episode delivers a gut punch on the political side. Back in Fatoa, Eris's grandfather Sauros is stripped of his position and publicly executed by the king as a scapegoat for the Mana Surge disaster. The arrival of the rainy season grounds dead end in Doldia village for 3 months. An enforced pause that becomes one of the season's most quietly heartwarming stretches. Eris befriends the village's youth, most notably Tona, a fierce young girl who is the daughter of village elder Gaius and the settlement's finest warrior in training. When Ghislaine's name is dropped in conversation, Gaius's reaction is sharp and bitter. Ghislaine is his younger sister, a source of shame for having abandoned the village rather than fulfilling her duty as a guardian. The revelation ignites something in Tona. She wants to train sword fighting, and Eris enthusiastically steps up as her instructor. When the rains finally clear and it's time to leave, Tona has a tearful falling out with Eris over her departure. Gaius bridges the gap by sharing the truth about Ghislaine's past, that she was relentlessly rebellious, and the village essentially expelled her by allowing an adventurer to take her away. A decision Gaius has quietly regretted ever since. The party leaves for the holy country of Milis, with Geese hitching along for the ride. Arriving at Milishion, the capital of the holy country of Milis, the party gives themselves a well-earned day off, but Rudeus spots what looks like an abduction in progress, follows the perpetrators, and comes face to face with his own father, Paul Greyrat. Paul explains that the teleportation disaster swallowed their entire home village, scattering everyone, and that he has spent the last year and a half desperately hunting for survivors. The reunion quickly turns ugly. Paul tears into Rudeus for never attempting to write letters home during his entire time on the Demon Continent, never stopping to think about the suffering of everyone else displaced by the disaster. Rudeus has no answer for it, and the argument escalates into a full physical brawl that only Norn's tearful intervention manages to stop. For Rudeus, The sight of Paul's companions looking down at him with disdain triggers a flood of traumatic memories from his past life, the bullying, the isolation, the shame, and he breaks down and runs. Eris finds him and does her earnest, clumsy best to cheer him up, which works just enough to stabilize him. Set during the events of episode 16, this OVA flips the perspective entirely and follows Eris during the day she's given off in Milishion, while Rudeus handles the whole Paul situation. Eris picks up a goblin-slaying quest and crosses paths with a young, theatrically pompous mage named Cliff Grimoire. Despite her irritation, Eris reluctantly agrees to form a temporary party with him. Their job goes predictably sideways. Cliff incinerates the goblins so thoroughly there's no evidence of completion, and they get completely lost in the forest. But things take a darker turn when they witness a group of assassins targeting a young girl and her guard Therese. Eris dispatches the assassins swiftly and, in a moment of sheer audacity, claims to Therese that she is Rougeur the Supered. As they leave, one of the surviving assassins recognizes Cliff as Master Cliff and seems puzzled by his company. Rougeur interrogates the dying assassin and learns the attackers were agents of the Pope, who advocates for human-demon coexistence, a stance fiercely opposed by the Temple Knights and their leader, the Archbishop. On the walk back to town, Cliff, clearly smitten and clearly overcompensating, proposes marriage to Eris and declares he must be more impressive than Rudeus. One look at Eris's face as she thinks about Rudeus, soft, warm, completely unguarded, and Cliff deflates entirely. He goes home despondent, where it is quietly revealed that the assassins he and Eris fought were actually his own tutors in disguise, presumably assigned to test him. Eris returns to find Rudeus still visibly shaken from his fight with Paul and does her best to comfort him. The emotional aftermath of episode 16 gets its resolution here, and it's one of the season's most cathartic moments. Geese, it turns out, is actually a member of Paul's search party, and he quietly visits Paul to remind him of something crucial. Rudeus is still, by any measure, just a child, however mature he seems. Paul is haunted by nightmares of all the terrible things that could have befallen his son while they were separated, and the weight of it breaks through his pride. He stops drinking. The next day, Paul and Rudeus meet again, and what begins as a stiff, awkward exchange slowly thaws as Rudeus realizes Paul wasn't attacking him out of contempt. He was lashing out from guilt and fear, and he's been fumbling toward an apology the entire time. The two break down and tearfully reconcile in one of the season's most emotionally satisfying scenes. Rudeus tells Paul he plans to escort Eris home before turning his full attention to searching for the rest of the family. After they part, Paul learns from Geese that he will independently continue the search, covering territory Paul's party hasn't yet reached. While Rudeus and his party sail across the sea toward the central continent, the episode cuts away to follow Roxy on a deeply personal detour. She returns home to the Magurdia village for the first time in years. The reunion with her parents is tender and slightly melancholy. Roxy has always felt like an outsider among her own people due to her inability to use telepathy, the primary mode of communication in her village. She considers leaving almost immediately, the old restlessness pulling at her, but a quiet moment of recognizing how much her parents have missed her makes her pause and stay a little longer. Her father and mother reveal that a young boy named Rudeus passed through their village roughly 2 years ago. The relief that washes over Roxy, knowing he's alive, knowing he was here, is palpable. Reassured but still driven, she says her goodbyes and sets off with Talhand and Ellen Elise to continue scouring the demon continent for the rest of Rudeus' missing family. The human god pays Rudeus another visit, this time with a very specific set of instructions. Follow this path, and you'll be reunited with Lilia and Aisha. Trusting the guidance, Rudeus steers his party toward the kingdom of Chiron, where he learns Roxy has been working as a court teacher in the royal palace. He sends her a letter to make contact, but before anything can come of it, Aisha nearly barrels straight into him while being chased by pursuers. Rudeus rescues her, but, on the human god's advice, keeps his true identity secret. The situation is immediately complicated by the fact that Aisha has strong opinions about Rudeus's character. She found Roxy's panties in Lilia's belongings, a keepsake Rudeus had treasured to his eternal embarrassment, and has concluded he is a pervert of the highest order. Things go from awkward to dangerous when Rudeus is summoned for an audience with Roxy, only to walk straight into a trap. The seventh Prince Pax, who is obsessively infatuated with Roxy, has taken Lilia hostage and intends to use Rudeus as bait to lure Roxy into his grasp. Imprisoned in the palace, Rudeus gets an unexpected visitor. Prince Zanoba, the third prince of Chiron, who has somehow tracked him down because he is a passionate, borderline fanatical admirer of the lifelike sculptures of Roxy and Rudeus that Rudeus has crafted and wants nothing more than to become his apprentice. Rudeus explains that only Pax can release him, and Zanoba immediately commits to fixing that. Meanwhile, outside, Pax's own guards smuggle Rudeus, Eris, and Aisha into the palace. Zanoba, revealed to be a blessed child with monstrous superhuman strength, seizes Pax and coerces him into freeing Rudeus. The guards, learning their families are safe, promptly abandon Pax entirely. In the warm aftermath, Lilia retrieves Roxy's panties from hiding and returns them to Rudeus without a word, along with a birthday necklace Sylphiette had made for him. Rudeus passes his beloved forehead protector on to Aisha as a keepsake. As she leaves, Aisha, who had been calling him a pervert the entire time, quietly admits she knew who he was all along. Both Pax and Zanoba are subsequently exiled from the kingdom under the polite fiction of studying abroad. While traveling, Dead End crosses paths with Orsted, the dragon god, one of the most powerful beings in existence. Eris and Rudeus are both instantaneously paralyzed with overwhelming, irrational dread, completely unable to move or fight. Rudeus, strangely and notably unaffected by this fear, walks forward and attempts to engage Orsted in conversation. This turns out to be a near-fatal mistake. Orsted, believing Rudeus to be an agent of the human god based on their association, attacks without hesitation. Rudeus and Eris, fighting through their terror, throw themselves between Rudeus and Orsted, but both are effortlessly defeated. Orsted mortally wounds Rudeus. In his dying moments, Rudeus has a final exchange with the human god, who reveals that Orsted carries a devastating curse that forces all living creatures to fear him instinctively. Rudeus thanks the human god, despite having no idea of his true motivations. Then a reprieve. Orsted's mysterious companion, Nana Hoshi, who appears to be a Japanese girl, like Rudeus's former self, intercedes on his behalf. Orsted withdraws, and Rudeus is allowed to live. In the quiet aftermath of the Orsted encounter, Rudeus opens up to Rudeus during the night, revealing what he knows about the human god, and noting that the ancient supered curse that once marked Rudeus is slowly, measurably fading, a moment of genuine hope for a man who has carried his burden for an eternity. The following day, the party reaches the ruins of Rudeus's hometown, and he walks through it with a flood of bittersweet flashbacks. Rudeus then delivers news of his own. He announces that Rudeus and Eris have grown strong enough to no longer need him as their protector. After a quiet and affecting farewell, Rudeus departs on his own road. The two continue on to Roa, which is also now ruins, and there they find Ghislaine waiting with Eris's servant Alphonse, who delivers devastating news. Both of Eris's parents were killed in the teleportation disaster, and her grandfather was executed by the king. Another branch of the Greyrot family has offered to absorb Eris through marriage to preserve the family name, though Ghislaine is visibly opposed. Rudeus searches the casualty records and finds no confirmation of Sylphiette's death. She is simply missing. That night, Eris enters Rudeus's tent, and they sleep together. The next morning, Rudeus wakes up alone. Eris has vanished, having left with Ghislaine in the night without a word or a note. Rudeus is shattered. The season finale spreads its gaze wide across every character thread simultaneously as Rudeus bottoms out. He falls into a severe depression, reliving his most traumatic memories from his past life. Eris has begun her own journey with Ghislaine, driving herself brutally hard to become strong enough to one day stand between Rudeus and someone like Orsted. Rudeus rescues travelers from beasts on the road and, in a small but meaningful moment, earns their gratitude even after revealing he is a superd, a tiny crack of light in his race's dark reputation. Zenoba and Geese continue their respective paths, each quietly holding Rudeus in fond memory. Geese and Tona train together in Doldia village, and Roxy, in a delightful turn of events, stumbles across Kishirika Kishirisu and ends up paying off her absurdly enormous bar tab, earning in return a vision from Kishirika's demon eyes that reveals the whereabouts of Rudeus's scattered family. Lilia, Aisha, Paul, and Norn have reunited, but Zenith is located deep in the labyrinth city of Rapan on the distant Begarit continent. Roxy immediately begins preparations to go after her. Back with Rudeus, it is a dream about his mother Zenith that finally pulls him back from the brink, reminding him that he has a reason to keep going, people who still need him, a duty that doesn't care about his heartbreak. He picks himself up. The episode ends on a tantalizing final image. Sylphiette, alive, is somewhere out there, pleading with an unknown group to find and recruit Rudeus. Season 1 ends not with a resolution, but with the world expanding in every direction at once.